moved away from their home where they grew up in New Jersey. When I was around 2, we moved all the way out to Ohio. So it was about a 10-hour drive. And we would go back to visit. Most of the relatives were still out in New Jersey. We'd go back at least once a year, often at the holidays. So it was me, my older sister, and my little brother making many trips in our car. And we would play different games in the car. And I think my sister is probably the one who kind of orchestrated being the oldest and kind of helped keeping us occupied. And we would play the alphabet game. But what I remember most is a game, and I'm pretty sure my sister made this up, and it was called Tornado. So if a tractor trailer passed you on the opposite way, you had to duck or you got your head chopped off. And I want to say there were even classifications for smaller sized trucks. You know, they were like, I don't know if we called them hurricanes or bad storms or whatever, but we had to duck. And I don't remember there being like a winner or loser of the game. It was just a silly thing we did. You know, it was like, oh, you got your head chopped off, you know, and I think that's what it was. I know it was a tornado and you had to duck. So it was just it's a fun memory I have from traveling, from being a child.
Well, and think about it, this is a more up-to-date one with us, but when we traveled, you used to wrap up toys in Christmas wrappings, like if it was, especially around the holidays, we would take our trip back to like St. Louis, where I'm from, and you would find toys that they hadn't played with in a while.
Yeah, that's when the kids were pretty little. Yeah. I forget, I read that idea somewhere. They were,
they were
toddlers, or I can't remember the first time I did it. I think it was for our second child.
Yeah.
And so I just took toys. It wasn't necessarily new things, but it was the excitement of unwrapping something. And so it kind of kept them occupied. Like, oh, you get to open it every hour or whatever. You get to open something new.
Hello, this is Don.
And Gina.
The Focus Healthy Family. This is podcast number 28, and today we're talking about travel. And we actually recorded these pieces of this recording while we were traveling. But before we get started, let's take a break for our sponsor.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Q Sciences. Don and I discovered that the supplements we were taking and giving to our children were not being absorbed properly. I was very excited when I found Q Sciences. I was impressed with the quality of the products and that they provide maximum absorption. They have a variety of products, including a Q Max product, which is a combination of 3 products, including vitamins, minerals, and a probiotic. They also have hemp oil, a vitamin B12 spray, a sleep spray, and kids products. I've really seen a difference in how these products are improving how I feel, improving my mental health, and I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. Or you can find a link on the front page of the focusedhealthyfamily.com website.
And stop throwing your money away on supplements that don't work and use a quality product like Q Sciences. And we're back. So in today's podcast, we begin with some stories, and we've recorded those traveling 3 hours to our daughter's house to celebrate our son's birthday.
And the other one, we traveled up to your reunion.
Yes, my 30-year college reunion up in Pennsylvania, and to visit my brother and see friends that I had not seen in about 23 years.
Very interesting trip. We had a good time doing it.
We did. We had a wonderful time. I got to see some friends I hadn't seen in years, got to walk around my college campus and just reminisce and spend time with my brother, and then come home and quarantine with COVID.
All 3 of us, actually.
First time we've had it, which is amazing that I've worked in healthcare in a nursing home all through the whole pandemic. So we're recovering, and I'm grateful for the 6+ pounds I've lost through COVID.
Well, and you can probably still hear it in our voices. They're still a little low.
So we're talking about travel, thinking about the holidays coming up, and in general, traveling with kids. It's a very different experience than traveling without kids. I remember, Don, we would go to St. Louis before we had kids, and it took about 12 hours to drive from Charlotte, North Carolina,
for the two of us,
to St. Louis. Yes. And in comparison, after kids, it was more like a 15 to 16-hour trip.
And we talk about that in the recording.
Yeah, and we embrace it. And so here's the remainder of these conversations. Hope you enjoy it.
It's October, what's the date, Don? I think it's the 13th. So we are on the road traveling to Pennsylvania for my 30-year college reunion. I'm not ashamed to say that. My 53rd birthday is on Saturday, and they decided to have my reunion over their homecoming weekend that same day. And so it felt like destiny that we should make this trek. We haven't all traveled up to Pennsylvania in a while. We get to visit my brother in Lansdale and then drive the 2 hours to where I went to college in Lancaster County. And it gets us thinking about traveling in family. This is the first time we've done a trip with just our youngest child. She gets the whole back seat to herself. Usually we have kids arguing and fighting, or
I want the window.
Yeah, fighting over seats, or in the car. We have many memories of that. Don's driving, so he's a little quieter than normal.
Well, it's rain and we're crossing a really, wow, look at the bridge.
Yeah, we're in Delaware right now. We've taken a different route than we usually do. So we usually do the 77 to 81. Goes through the mountains.
Look, over here.
So it's a well-known route, right? So we had to take the car to the mechanic, and we're like, well, that's going to put us over here. Just look at the bridge. Like, see, it's interesting looking. So we've seen some new things, gotten some pictures from D.C. at a distance, because it was better to go kind of around it than through it, right? We've always enjoyed our traveling we've done with the family and just getting to see some different things, but it can be stressful being in the car.
No. Ice, whatever, weather.
Babies and crying. And
crying while you're trying to drive in the storm.
Nursing and traveling and, 3 kids in the car, and right now we have one. I think she's having a grand time having the whole back seat to herself. So this podcast is going to air around the holidays approaching, when a lot of people start traveling to see family, so much going on, right? I know it's been more stressful when we've traveled around a holiday, especially for us it's Christmas or Thanksgiving versus like when we've traveled out to see family for a wedding. Because everybody's got other family they got to see, and it just feels more chaotic. Wouldn't you say that, Don, compared to the times we've gone to like a wedding or something?
Well, we have to, for us, with some of our special diets, we have to really plan out, and I think that's a tip that I would tell anybody is that you really need to kind of plan out and think about what's priority of where you want to go, how you want to get there. And what you want to take with you, we like I say, with that diet constrictions, we have to carry a lot of our food with us.
And especially when you have children, them eating things that they're not used to eating, right, can throw off their behavior greatly. Especially if your kids have, sensitivity to certain foods, food dyes, the amount of sugar, right? Traveling, you can wind up with fast food and things that have additives and other ingredients, or just, maybe they don't have serious food sensitivities that you know of, but they're going to be eating differently than normal. For us,
that can mess you up. Just
it can. I remember with even when we had the 2 children, and I tried not to do too much candy, but I'd let it slide around holidays. But then it was like there was always a holiday. it was Christmas, it was Valentine's Day, it was Easter, and then I remember telling my mom, okay, if you're going to get her candy, get chocolate, because that doesn't have food dye in it, because we definitely saw an issue with our second child and food dye, you know, and she could honor that. She's like, okay, we'll buy chocolate candy.
Well, the other thing is, if they're going to be around a lot of sweets and a lot of food that they don't normally eat, before you leave home,
oh yeah,
eat a little bit more of the good foods so that they're not as hungry that they're gobbling down tons of the food.
And so when you're traveling, you know, having things with you. So I didn't get to do as much of the food prep as I wanted to before we left early this morning. So we stopped at Aldi's, and very inexpensive, small little salads we got. You know, we knew we could get foods we could eat, and affordable. And we know we're going to be able to go to the grocery store at my brother's. And in the past, we've packed a lot of things ahead of time just so that we know we have what we need. It's a little easier to get a hold of things now, like non-dairy milks and things. And so thinking about that. But I like to do things like cookies, muffins, other things my kids can't eat. You know, a kid can't eat corn and dairy and gluten. If I make it ahead of time and bring it, then they don't feel deprived. They don't feel like they're not getting to eat what other people are getting to eat. Or, you know, you wind up going, well, okay, we'll do it just this once, right? But especially with younger kids, you know, it just can really throw things off. You're already out of your usual routine. You're in the car a lot maybe. You know, things are different. People are different. All those things throw into that mix. So as we're driving, and it's fall, so it's pretty trees right now as we're winding through Delaware, allowing extra time so you can stop, you know, look at things. I remember one time, I guess coming home from St. Louis, we went to Memphis just to spend a night to do something different, you know, because it's a long drive from Charlotte, North Carolina to St. Louis, Missouri, and we would usually make it there in one day by leaving at like 5 in the morning, but coming home you lose an hour with the time change, and it would help to have a stopover. And we had a good time when we...
Well, it's because of the excitement isn't there going home as there was going to someplace.
Right. But you also have this time zone change, and just you're tired from the trip, right? And we had so much fun that we stopped in Memphis and got to see some things there. And like taking the different routes this time, you know, our youngest got her camera and we rolled down the window and we got a picture of she got a picture of the Capitol from a distance. And when we come back through, it might be earlier in the day, we might actually go drive through D.C. We'll see. We definitely want to do that. We think it's called the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, something like that, where it's a bridge that goes into the water, right? And so noticing different things, you know, going into different states, and just there's so many road games you can play, you know, giving that extra time, thinking about, okay, what's really valuable, what's really important here. You know, I'm going up, I haven't seen some of my friends in years, and finally I'm trying to make that work into the reunion, and the people who are not going to the reunion but live within a couple hours of that area. And I was almost going to overschedule myself, and I went, you know what, driving an hour and a half to see her Friday night, getting up real early Saturday morning, I'm like, that may be too much, you know. She couldn't do any other days. Like, well, we'll have to get together another time, right? Got to keep, you know, my kids in mind and what their needs are. And
you want to make memories, not anxiety.
Yeah. And having more than one kid, like right now, I'm like, oh, this is easy. We just, like, he's interested in this, we'll do that. When you have multiple kids and this kid doesn't want this or doesn't want that, you know, I think we're making this trip a lot smoother, and it's just, we got less people's needs to meet. It's a different experience, so.
Well, that again is planning based on expectations.
Right. And talking about ahead of time, you know, talking about, okay, the family, these situations could happen. When we first married, and I remember, Don, we would kind of have a word we'd use, like if we were getting stressed by our in-laws, that we could kind of be a word that we both understood, that we needed to stop and talk about things, or, you know, one of us was feeling disconnected. And as I always say to you, you know, enjoy the journey. It's more important than the destination. And
especially when you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic.
Yes, so enjoy the journey.
And now on to Raleigh, North Carolina, for our second conversation. Well, my travel when I was a kid was a little different. We probably played some kind of game at some point, but the first part of the trip we had to do the rosary. We were Catholics, and it was interesting because Mom would sit up in the front with her rosary, and she would do the first half of each prayer for each bead. With Catholic with the rosary, you would go from, they were beads. It was like almost looked like a bracelet, a necklace or something like that, because it had little beads on it. And you go from bead to bead, and you would say, I think it was a Hail Mary.
There was a prayer for each bead.
For each bead. She would say the first half of the prayer. We would have to respond as kids, and I guess my dad too. Luckily, my dad was on our side of it, because he was the only one that really knew it, I think. Because most of us just kind of went.
I thought that was more you being the youngest, and
I
didn't remember
I'm sure
all
Ken,
the words.
my oldest brother, and my next oldest brother, because they actually went to seminary, so they probably were able to respond. But I didn't really know the prayers. I was pretty young at the beginning of that, and so I didn't know the prayers very well. But I wanted to participate, because that Mom expected each of us to participate. Otherwise, she would say something.
You didn't have very long trips, right, when you traveled?
No, our trips, well, they were about probably 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours.
Because Don grew up in St. Louis, and he had relatives.
My relatives were up in Jefferson City, which is the capital of Missouri. And like I say, back then it was all mostly two-lane roads, so it would take a lot longer. Now you can get up there probably in about an hour.
Because this is back in the 60s.
And on the trip up there, a lot of the highways were cut through like small little mountains or huge hills, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And so the rock on the side would always be these really interesting colors and stuff. And I used to imagine them as ice cream. And I'd have this big scoop that I would stick out the window and try to scoop up some of that ice cream off of those mountains.
Kind of the marbled look of the rocks.
Yeah.
And because it was carved out.
And it was really pretty. I mean, it was very...
Yeah, driving out from St. Louis out west, there's mountains.
It's further hilly and stuff, so...
Because your grandparents were farmers.
Yeah.
So driving
on both sides, actually.
Driving out to the farms, right?
The farm was pretty much. My grandfather died when I was 5, I think, or 6, and so I didn't get as much time on the farm to travel out to the farm as my brothers. They got to do all the kind of fun stuff.
Didn't they go out every summer to spend time on the farm? But you were too young to go do that. So we're traveling right now.
Yeah.
As we talk.
Truck right here just coming over.
I'll let Don concentrate on driving. We are traveling because we get together for birthdays. It's something we always do. Is the 5, now it's 6 of us with my son's fiance, and we try to get together on the person's actual birthday. Sometimes we just hang out together. Sometimes we go and do something. And now our middle daughter lives 3 hours away, and she has a hard time taking time off to come back home. And Harrison's birthday is the 10th, so as we're recording this, that's the end of the week. I know this won't air till after that. And what we're doing is we're going to Raleigh, where Abby lives, and Harrison's joining us tomorrow, and we're going to celebrate his birthday early up at her place. And it's kind of fun because the house that she rents with her friend is bigger than the house we live in at home.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of room there actually for us, and we'll just get to hang out and spend time together. So we're on this little 3-hour drive today, talking about traveling and reminiscing about
the Sheets Arts project, all the design and the...
So Don's noticing there is a
Sheets is a convenience store.
So it's the oil. I mean, that looks like an oil carrier,
truck, yeah.
An oil truck, and it says Sheets on it, but there's all kinds of pictures on
Well,
it.
it said Sheets Art Project.
Oh,
so I guess
okay, it was an
that's
art project. It was very pretty. For an oil truck, it's usually just metal, silver, whatever. And this was red with sheets on it and all kinds of art pictures on it. So when you're in the car with kids, it can be helpful to find fun and different things to do.
Well, we came across that bingo game, remember?
Yeah, oh yeah, did we bring it? We didn't bring
I
it.
think we brought it.
It's sign bingo, which I'm sure my mom got as a gift for Harrison because our oldest was fascinated and obsessed with road signs. And so I recently found it. I'm like, oh, this could be fun to play on a trip. You know, so our oldest was born in 97, so in the early 2000s, sometime after Abby was born, she was born in 2002, people started having DVD players in their car and things. We didn't have one. We had an older minivan. It didn't have that. And yet someone gifted us a small little compact DVD player, not much bigger than our kids' Switch.
Yeah.
And we set up a little table. It was just the two of them at the time.
In a van.
And we had our Mazda minivan, and we set like a table in the middle in the back seat so that they could watch a movie while we were driving, and that was like a big deal.
We had to strap it down.
Yeah, and then you plug it into the...
I think that was the blue van, not the Toyota.
Okay. But we plug it in, and it would cause a short in the lighter. I think when we were draining our battery, I remember our mechanic said, well, that could be the reason, because we were plugging things like that into the what used to be the cigarette lighter, where you now have an auxiliary port to plug different things in. So that was kind of a fun new thing, right? But now kids have all kinds of electronic consoles to go on, but it can be fun to do other things, like play the alphabet game, where you look out and try to find, the letters of the alphabet in signs.
Yeah, it's that idea of connecting with your kids and not just setting them up to be in front of the screen the whole time.
And it can be very helpful. Stressful driving, it can be helpful that kids can wear headphones, so if they can each listen to their own music, so there's no, arguing over music. We've listened to books in the car. We've listened to them as a whole family, but also the kids were off doing their own thing. We could listen to our own book or our own music. So it's that having that technology is helpful.
Oh, yeah.
It's helpful, and yet it can be fun to engage and use the time interactively to play some different games as you're traveling along the road. I believe it was when we lived in Pittsburgh. We moved to Pittsburgh in 1979. We moved there as the World Series was going on. The Pirates won the series. And then that January, the Steelers won the Super Bowl. So we became diehard Pittsburgh fans. And we only lived there 3 years. But we just were avid Pittsburgh fans. And I can remember driving along in the car, and we got a station wagon that had 3 rows. This was a 77 Oldsmobile station wagon, and the rear row was facing out. It was facing opposite of the other rows. And it was kind of fun to sit there and be able to see people and wave at people. And I have a memory of like holding up a sign, like "Go Pittsburgh Pirates" or something like that, to passing cars. And just, it was kind of novel to have the third row seat to begin with, and then that it faced backwards like that. And I'm trying to remember when we took a long trip, like back to New Jersey, whether one of us got to sit in the back, or the 3 of us had to squeeze in the middle because we needed the back for suitcases and things. Something I'm going to have to ask my brother, him being the youngest and the smallest. I'm sure he's the one that got stuck sitting in the middle. And there's a pink Tesla driving by us. It's a very pretty pink color.
I didn't know they sold them that color.
Yeah. So looking for different license plate game, looking for different license plates of different states can be a lot of fun. Now people have personalized plates, looking for personalized plates. There's so many different ways that you can make a game out of driving. Do you have other memories, Don, from traveling as a kid or with our own kids?
Well, when I was a kid, though, talking about going to Jefferson City, when we got to there was a city called Kingdom City, and it was when we got there, the exit had rumble strips on it. So we drove in station wagons. I grew up with those, and I would sleep in the back, this is before seat belts were the thing to be. We would lay in the back and sleep on these trips, and then we'd get to that rumble that would tell us we were like 30 minutes away. On that particular exit, there was a gas station. Every once in a while we would stop there if we needed gas. It was a gas station, it wasn't a convenience store. They didn't have those back then. And I remember as a very small kid, probably maybe 7 or 8, we stopped at that gas station, had to go to the bathroom, and I asked my dad what the condom machine was. I don't remember his response. More than likely, probably just brushed it off somehow.
Deflected.
But it just, like I said, there's little memories I have of, like I say, and it was a gas station where you pulled up, and the attendant came out, washed your windshield, checked your oil, checked your tires, filled your tank, did the whole full service that you don't ever see nowadays.
Well, in New Jersey,
they used to. They kind of gave that up too, I think.
Well, but as far as I know, you're not allowed to pump your own gas in New Jersey. I remember looking this up recently because that was when did that come to be where you were allowed to pump your own gas? Because for the longest time you weren't allowed. There were attendants who pumped your gas, and then states started passing laws.
I think it came with the 70s, the gas shortage, like in the mid 70s.
But there are states that did not allow that, and as far as I know, New Jersey still does not allow you to pump your own gas. And I remember looking it up, and there might be one or two other states that don't allow it. So it's kind of a novel thing if you travel to a state like that you're not allowed to do that.
Well, and too, when I was a kid, it wasn't just a lot of times one attendant would come out. You'd have 3 or 4 that would come out and like cover the car basically with everything, and you'd be in it. It was almost like the race teams now have when they pull in for all these people come out, and within minutes they're back on the track. Well, this was pretty fast. They would do everything, get it all done, and you'd be gone.
So I'm 11 years younger than Don, so my memories of travels were more in the 70s. And I mean, I vaguely remember gas station attendants, but I have a feeling, because wasn't it cheaper to do self-serve? I think it cost less when they started doing self-serve.
Yeah,
so I'm sure my parents chose self-serve if it was less costly.
Yeah.
And so I remember it being an option as a kid.
Well, then there was when I was probably in college, and my brother lived in Kansas City, which on the same path to Jeff City, but a little bit different. But I'm driving along, and back then they used to, I think you can still find, the gas stations used to have these really tall signs. They were, that would stand way above the building. Mm-hmm. And there was a Shell station, and the S had fallen off of the sign, and I couldn't pass it up. I was like, I've got to stop in. So I pull off, go to the station. And I walk in, and the guy said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I was just curious what hell was like." and he didn't find that funny at all.
He didn't get your joke.
Yeah, I had to kind of point to the sign, and even that didn't make him any happier. So
I've got to share a couple other stories. So Don and I met in North Carolina, so we've always lived here. My parents were from Pennsylvania, his family in St. Louis. Until my parents moved to South Carolina, we would travel up to Pennsylvania, and we'd travel to St. Louis, taking trips. And one year, I think it was a St. Louis trip, because Abby was about 2, and she had this little baby doll she called Dolly Hairclips. It was a bald little baby doll, but that was what she named her baby doll, Dolly Hairclips. And we stopped to get out of the car to make a stop, and Dolly Hairclips fell out of the car and hit the ground, and her head came off. And we just kind of froze and looked at each other, and I'm trying to remember what Abby said. She wasn't phased.
Pretty lightly.
She wasn't phased by it. It's like, Dolly's head fell off.
Yeah.
And it's a year or a couple years later, you're brother and sister came to visit us, and they sewed her head back on, but
They sewed it crooked.
It was slightly crooked, so we joked about the baby having a... But luckily, Abby thought it was funny. We were very worried if that was going to bother her or not, but she was amused by it. And the other fun story is Abby was about the same age, and we'd give them coloring activities and things to do in the back seat, her and her older brother. They're 4 years apart. And we looked back in the mirror, and she had taken a purple marker and colored all over her face. So it looked like someone had beat her up because it was purple. And we were stopping to go get something to eat or something. And we're like, oh my God, people are going to think we beat our child because her face was covered in purple.
Luckily, I think it was one of those erasable kind of pen. It wasn't
yeah, but I remember she looked in the mirror and she was horrified, because she just thought she was putting lipstick on. I don't know what she thought she was doing. She was that kind of kid who cut her hair and did things like that. Yeah. And so that was a funny memory. We used to pack a lot of our own food and didn't do a lot of fast food stops, but we would stop at the places that had the play yards for the purpose of playing in them. We might order some fries or something and have it with our food. I get that from my mom. But we'd stop where there was a play yard place, so it was more for Abby that she would get out and play and exercise, because sitting in the car could be tedious. And I still remember our son wasn't a big climbing person, but she was. And I remember him walking around the climbing structure and making sure it was safe for his little sister to climb on.
But he used to have to go up there sometimes and get her.
To help her?
I can't remember. I remember at least one time we had to send him in because we couldn't climb up in it or something. I don't think they would allow the weight or whatever, our own weight. So we sent him up to help her back down or something. I can't remember.
So yeah, I remember doing that because sitting still for a long time can get tiring. And so talking about fast food stops. So as a child, we made these trips frequently, 8-10 hour drives. Yet my mom was all about packing food. We never ate at fast food restaurants. I remember stopping at Howard Johnson's because I would get fried clams. And I remember stopping at diners, family diner kind of places to eat. But I have one memory. We were moving from Canton, Ohio to Pittsburgh. It's about a 2-hour drive. And we had our dog Coco, our collie. And I think he was sedated to make it easier for him to travel. And maybe because we had him with us, we went through, I think, a McDonald's. And I just remember it was such a big deal because that was something we never did. We never did it at home. Even as we got older, that's not something my parents ever did, was go to fast food places. And I can thank my mother for that, for instilling the healthy values. And of course, I ate my share of fast food as an adult when I made up for it. But I just remember how exciting it was to go to a fast food place on our travels. Many memories of traveling with kids. And when our oldest was born, we actually drove, and we tell the story in one of our other podcasts. I think one of our first podcasts we aired about, he was 6 weeks old. He was born November 10th, and we decided to drive to St. Louis to be there for Christmas Eve, because that's when Don's family would celebrate, would be Christmas Eve. And then Christmas Day, we drove from St. Louis, Missouri to Allentown, Pennsylvania to be able to celebrate Christmas. We did it the day after with my family, who was mostly living up in Pennsylvania still. I guess my sister was in Raleigh. I don't know if she made it up to Pennsylvania that year. But it was quite a whirlwind of driving. And I remember saying to you, we had just one baby in the car, and I'd always looked forward to being a mom and having multiple kids. And I said, I can't wait till we have a bunch of kids and they're in the back seat arguing. And of course we had many years of that, of kids in the back seat. And now that 2 of our children have moved out, we took our first trip up to Pennsylvania from Charlotte. Just the 3 of us, and we share more about that, and just realizing, we're back to 1 kid again, and now we appreciate the quiet. I looked forward to the noise of many kids when I was a new mom, and I do miss those days, though, of all the fun and just it took a lot longer on those trips, but we didn't rush it. We knew we needed to take time for longer stops, to stretch legs, and we just blessed the fact that instead of 12 hours, it was going to take us 15, and we were okay with it. And we also, coming back from St. Louis, we'd often do a stop. I remember we went to Tennessee, to Memphis one time, stayed overnight somewhere to make that trip home not quite as crazy. That's our podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you. Please make sure to leave us a comment. If you like what you heard today, you can learn more about us and our program or join us for an upcoming workshop at www.focusedhealthyfamily.com. You can follow us on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family, Instagram at Gina at Focused Healthy Family. And remember, how you speak to your children shapes their future.